Welcome to the Matchbook Betting Podcast, where we're focusing on the semi-finals of the Rugby World Cup. It's getting super exciting now. Probably the four best teams in the world left in there. Sorry to any Irish viewers out there, but I think you could possibly say that's correct. I mean, a brutal weekend last weekend, joined by two men who are still drying their tears. Mark O'Haire from We Love Betting and Aidan Sully O'Sullivan from Matchbook. Gents, how are we feeling about last weekend?
Don't really want to talk about it. Do we have to talk about this?
I think we have to talk about it a little bit. I mean, the ABs.
Yeah. Look.
How can you play against that?
Let's get that out of the way, and then we'll be done with the Irish talk. Then, yeah, we're happy with that. Okay. So obviously, I went with Ireland plus 12.5. I pretty much knew after about 11 minutes that it wasn't going to come up. New Zealand, to their credit, were absolutely exceptional. When they're playing that kind of way, there's no one beats them, including my fancy the Springboks for the tournament. Nobody beats them. Even against the rush defence, their passing was so crisp. They adapted. Their forward pack was great. Their defence was fantastic. That being said, the Irish made a hell of a lot of stupid mistakes they would never have made before. They were careless, missing kicks for touch, missed tackles, knock-ons, just didn't look right. But New Zealand were absolutely superb, and are full value for the cover, and they could have won that game by 60 or 70 points. That scoreline flattered the Irish exceptionally.
Yeah, I mean, we often say with these things, you can be blinded by results. Matches can play out in various different ways, and sometimes you look back and you think, yeah, I shouldn't have made that bet. That was a bad decision. Or sometimes you think, well, I'd do the same thing again. The match didn't play out the way I expected. Which one of those two do you think it was with Ireland, New Zealand? Because I was quite a big advocate of Ireland. It was probably my best bet of the weekend. Absolutely, as you say, decimated all over by about 5-6 minutes in. I mean, do you feel like that was a bad bet or a bad result, as we like to say?
I'd say I don't think it was a bad bet. I think, we talked last week about New Zealand's possible weaknesses and Ireland's strengths. All three of us were reasonably positive that the game was going to be quite a tight encounter. Yeah. But, rugby's a strange sport at times. Teams can just roll over others. And as Sully said, Ireland just made too many unforced errors. But for as bad as Ireland were, New Zealand were absolutely exceptional. And I think that's the standard that we're going to see to win this World Cup. If you're going to win it, you're going to have to play as good as New Zealand did against Ireland. If they reach those levels, as Sully says, they're going to win the World Cup. But I don't think it was a bad bet at all, because based on the evidence we've seen over not just this year, because I think we could get a little bit carried away with New Zealand in 2019, because I've mentioned a few times now, but the last three times they haven't won the Rugby Championship was 2011, 2015 and 2019, all World Cup years. They used the Rugby Championship as an extended World Cup warm-up and almost like a pre-season, really. So they're almost kind of peaking at the right time. I know all teams want to try and do that, but I probably got a little bit carried away with kind of trying to read too much into their weaknesses and didn't really focus on their strengths. But the game was over long before half-time. 22-0 at half-time, but yeah. We mentioned all the things that Ireland had to be last Friday, and they weren't any of them, which is, you're never gonna have a chance against New Zealand if you're playing catch up after 20 minutes, let alone 10 minutes. And Ireland were quite rightly panned in the press, but New Zealand absolutely exceptional. And if they reach those standards this weekend, it's going to be a tough game for England.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the other side of that coin, teams that have kind of underperformed but are still there, you've got to say Wales. I mean, Sully, your best bet was Wales minus 6.5. I mean, that never looked like happening. I mean, how do you view that performance, that game? Wales sort of seem to stumble their way through, fall over, and somehow get through the door.
Yeah, it's funny one. I mean, look, it was kind of widely fancied that the four favourites would win last weekend. Of course, we plugged the fact that you could have backed that ACCA at 2.7, 2.8. ACCA is now obviously available on Matchbook for a whole range of sports. So good weekend for the ACCA backers of that one. However, you were made to sweat in a major way with the Wales game. I mean, look, Valimahina, if anyone was going to give a red card in that situation, he would probably be, a 2-1 favourite of the French team there to do that, because, we've seen him with Clermont in previous years. He's a bit brain dead. He's obviously a physical specimen, but he just gives away exceptional amount of stupid penalties, and that was just an absolute killer. I mean, you saw where they were in the field at that stage. They had a driving maul 5 meters out. The French pack were all over the Welsh pack. The backs were loving it. They were just all over them. And that game, that decision, and the right decision, obviously, turned the game completely. And I don't think Wales would have won even at that situation with 15-15. Didn't look like it. Were they doing by 9 points around that time? It just didn't look like it was going to happen for them. And, you can kind of look at it in two ways, and we'll get to Wales in a while, and you can kind of say, okay, is this their bad game on their system? They went into that as favourites. Nobody was giving France a hope, including us here. And, Wales, although they got the win, kind of laid a bit of an egg, I thought. And it'd be interesting this weekend to see where they can go, because they're facing a different beast altogether in South Africa on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, let's just dive straight into it. I mean, people want to know where to get their bets on this weekend. I mean, maybe we come to Mark first off to get a thought, because you had Japan with the points against South Africa. I mean, how are you feeling about that South African performance? There's very mixed reviews. You can kind of look at it in a couple of different ways. You could really take a few different views from that South African performance. What's your perspective on how they performed and their chances against Wales this weekend?
I think their chances are pretty strong. I think that's reflected in the prices. I thought they were professional about how they did their job against Japan. Obviously, the halftime score of 5-3 looked like the game was in the balance, but they always felt in control. And I think their physicality and then the game management told in the second half, really. The rolling maul was quite a sight to behold. It was 40-50 metres or so. And I think they're going to follow a similar blueprint here, use their size, their power to try and kind of overrule Wales a little bit. I'm not sure that's the right angle to take, because the Welsh are no slouches in the physical stakes. But I think you can see with their squad selection, 6 forwards on the bench, must be one of the biggest packs ever assembled. But they're only going to try and play this game one way. In terms of the weather, I know we like to talk about the weather. Go. We've not really predicted it right at all. But both games in Yokohama this weekend, and we're talking on Friday, and it's raining all day today. It's supposed to clear for Saturday, but it's supposed to return again on Sunday. So I think that's probably a bonus for Wales, really, because I think South Africa are only going to try and play one way, and it's a way in which Wales could easily stifle them. I'm not going to say they will, but I think with Pollard and de Klerk playing at the half-backs, possession-based style is definitely where they're going to look towards the boot as well. They'll invest in their defence and their size as well, try and force the penalties, force Wales into mistakes in their own half. It's an approach that works reasonably well, especially under Rassi as well. But I think that weather will certainly help them. But against the Japan team, who have excited massively in this competition with their exciting kind of running style, to only concede 3 points was a marvellous defensive effort. And I think Wales are going to have to be at their very best, if not better than that, to come close to South Africa this weekend.
I mean, what's your view on this, Sully? You're surprisingly bullish on Wales a lot of the time. Can you find it in your heart to see them taking this one? I mean, talk us through the lines as well first. Give us some prices.
Yeah, it's an interesting market so far. Obviously, Liam Williams is minus now, so it's kind of given South Africa an extra half a point. But we've seen a fair bit of sport at Matchbook all week for Wales. There was plus 8.5 around earlier in the week. I see some 9 with some of the sports books, which I think is a bit too big. But general line, what we're sitting at the moment is 7.5 at Matchbook, and you can back South Africa. South Africa favoured in this market about 1.8, 2.2, or Wales plus 7.5. I think that's a fair line. I think you start getting kind of stupid when you get to 9 or 10. I think that's exceptionally disrespectful of Wales. I'd worry a small bit for Wales here, given what the French pack did to them the last day. I think obviously South Africa pack is, just a good few notches above that. And when you look at South Africa the last day, I mean, Japan gave it to them, plenty of them in the first half. But the second half was a tactical masterclass by South Africa about how to beat Japan and how to play to their own strengths and not get involved in that kind of game. And just literally absolutely, it was almost like the second half was South Africa had their foot on Japan's throat, and we're kind of just gently squeezing it, gently squeezing. And then with 20 minutes to go, it was just drop dropped a foot on the throat, and it was just absolutely suffocate the life out of Japan. Now, the other side of this here is that I don't think it's going to be as easy as getting to Wales, but I do think that South Africa, look, I've been big on them all year, and I think that this is a game that they come to play, whether or notwithstanding. I know that the pitches, we saw some videos, we're recording this early Friday afternoon, and we saw the videos from the Yokohama pitch this morning, and there's a hell of a lot of surface water, but I'll temper that in the sense that there was a lot of that surface water prior to the Japan and Scotland game too, and whatever the hell they have, whoever the hell they have working there as their groundsman, they should be, on six figures after this World Cup, because they do get this pitch obviously in good nick. So obviously if there's rain coming Sunday morning, as Mark was saying, or Sunday afternoon Japanese time, then that's one to kind of watch. However, I can't kind of get it out of my head here that South Africa won't progress, and it's just about how to find a way to kind of attack that. 7.5, I don't mind that number. I think it's going to be close enough. And remember, South Africa, very pragmatic team. As strong as that rolling maul is, they'll be quite happy to point to the posts, and they're not a team generally that I think will blow teams out. And we saw that even against Japan, even though they were that much better than them, they still won by only 20 odd points. So for me, I think I might be interested in the Mark O'Haire special here. I think Mark is probably going to tip this anyway, but I think I'm really liking it this week, the South Africa 1-12. I think you can shoot back at around 2.6, 2.7 currently. So yeah, total is 40.5. That seems about right to me. Two very good goal kickers in Bigger and Pollard. I don't think Halfpenny will be taking the kicks off Bigger. So yeah, Mark, it's got to be South Africa 1-12 here, surely.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I felt a little bit embarrassed to win the Wales by 1-12 last weekend after what I said about France. But Alan, you were spot on really with your concerns about Wales. And if we're looking at this competition alone, you have to say that arguably Australia and Fiji had outplayed Wales for large periods of their games. Yeah. The French did as well. And obviously injuries to Liam Williams will negate the attacking threat, with Halfpenny coming in. He's a safe replacement defensively, but going forward doesn't offer the same. And Navidi's a big blow as well. I know Moriarty's obviously a decent ball carrier, but I do think you lose something around the park there. But Wales have actually conceded at least 13 points in all 5 of their games, which doesn't sound like a big figure, but it is, considering where they are normally under Warren Gatland. They're normally so steely defensively. And if you look at their try differential in the tournament, they scored 19 and conceded 12, which is not what you expect from a team that have come through a group stage as group winners, really. So I don't think head-to-head records have any bearing in this match whatsoever, because Rassie Erasmus has arrived reasonably late to the party. South Africa have been on an upward trajectory since, but their record in 2019 and since the back end of 2018 against Tier 1 teams has been exemplary, really. And I just think they're more composed about their business. They know what they're doing. They're bigger, they're fiercer. Defensively, I'd probably put them as a slight notch higher than Wales as well. And as Sully says, I just think they'll see the game out reasonably comfortably. They're pragmatic, and I think the 1-12 is the way to go here. I think anything above 7 for me on the handicap is just slightly less appealing than the winning margin, because I think it could be a one-score game. And I think, after being so kind of pro Wales last weekend, I think we're almost in danger of writing them off too quickly in this sort of situation. They'll be up for it. It's a World Cup semi-final. I don't see them bowing out without a massive fight. So I think it's going to be a bit of an arm wrestle. And of course, we've got Jerome Garces as the referee as well. So the breakdown's going to be an absolute hellhole.
The Springboks absolutely loved it. He's ref. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, what do you make of the way that the kind of markets have perceived Wales as this tournament's gone on? South Africa, I think, look much like the team we expected coming in. I can see why models and odds on them haven't really moved particularly. Wales don't, but yet they seem to be being priced up as if they are the same team that we expected coming in. I don't know about you, I was kind of expecting that line to open maybe close to double figures based on the respective performances. Does it feel like there's a bit of juice in that? Do you think it's going to move a bit as we get a bit nearer to the game and the serious money starts coming in?
I think could potentially move with South Africa. I think that if the Wales move has come, and as I've said earlier, it obviously has come a Matchbook during the week, and it's a funny one because if we look at their Six Nations forms, I think definitely you saw like what France did to them defensively. They seem to be missing a few tackles now, and I think Navidi's a big loss as well. And are we really short of Jonathan Davis' fit here? You know, that's
I had a poll up on my Twitter this morning asking at what point is he going to pull out of the squad, because it just seems like one of those classic Welsh things of, you know, stick him in, hope for the best, pull him out at the last minute, and leave yourself at a worse spot than you would have been if you'd not bothered in the first place.
And I mean, look, we saw if he doesn't start, that is massive as well. I mean, and he's obviously not right there. And the Springbok centres with Dialendi and Am, they're really good defensively. Like, I mean, they just don't give anything away. And if you look at, you know, South Africa defensively are probably the best team left in this competition now. And Wales would have always probably hung their hat on that a bit, but I think some teams, and you definitely saw it against Fiji, you definitely saw it with Australia, like you said, Al, and you saw it with France last week, that there are holes in this Welsh defence now, for whatever reason. And I really didn't like the look of Watkin at 13 the last day. You know, that, I mean, in all honesty, we got that news early Saturday morning. Sunday morning ahead of it, and I was like, oh no, -6.5 is like, you know, I know you can't always say that, you know, one player makes a certain difference, but you look at this Welsh team, and if you lose the likes of Alan Wynne-Jones, Jonathan Davies, those kind of key pieces, they're massive because they haven't got a major amount of depth in comparison to some teams. And like I said, Watkin was playing at 13. He normally plays his rugby with the Ospreys at 12. So, you know, Scott Williams is there at 13 now, but yeah, there's just a lot of question marks. And even a 7.5, if I got bad pricing, it's a bit skimpy at the moment, like a 1.8, but if I got 1.9 or something, I might be looking at that. But I think definitely 2.6 or 2.7 or 1 to 12 market I think that's pretty solid. I think that's pretty solid bet.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to say it, it feels it to me too. I mean, you're kind of banking on Wales putting in a performance that they just haven't showed that they look like pulling out of the bag yet. You're kind of hoping they just find something in reserves.
I know there's a lot of
great performance. I just don't see it happening.
I've heard a lot of people, even just watching people on Twitter, saying that, you know, Wales have won the last 4 against South Africa, but they've won the last 4 against South Africa, but not this South Africa. You know, not this coaching setup. And
I think there was 7 or 8 players in November from this side. It's not entirely different, but it's not the same side.
No, but they beat a few of those teams that, you know, were carrying the you know, all South African based players that weren't bringing in the European players. And it'd be South Africa for me. It's just a matter of figuring out the right angle to play it at, and right now 1 to 12 2.7, it seems a very, very solid bet.
Both seem very happy with that one. Yep. I mean, you have these always the potential for some higher odds bets in these matches. If you had your mythical 10 quid on this one, do either of you fancy anything in this game?
Mark, do you want to go?
I'll go first. You know, I think we're all in agreement it's going to be reasonably tight. Attritional, defences on top, possession and territory are going to be key. But I think the two teams will be looking to build a score as quickly as possible, looking towards getting points on the board as and when they possibly can. So, you know, I know it's, drop goals have landed. A drop goal has landed in 9 of the last 16 Rugby World Cup semi-finals.
Good stat. Great statting, Mark.
Strong stacker.
I think it'd be very surprising if we didn't see one in this match with, you know, Biggar and Pollard on show, both of them like a drop goal. But so I'm going to venture into the first scoring play. You can back either team really to score the first scoring play as a drop goal, around about 33 to 1. So if you risk-free bet, back I don't know, Wales or South Africa, and then also back the other side as well with I don't know, your own £10 as well, and you're almost onto a no-lose bet there. So getting 16 to 1 each of the two. So that's where I'd be heading towards. You know, obviously penalties are going to be the hot favourite in that market, but it wouldn't be a huge surprise if one of them pulled out a long-range drop goal inside the first 5-10 minutes. So yeah, that's where I'd be heading.
I love that. I really love that angle, because like you said, Pollard and Biggar, if you're picking out 2 fly halves left in this World Cup, they love a drop goal. They love a drop
and long ranges as well, which always helps.
Plus you've always got the free shot option, haven't you? You know, penalties being awarded, don't look like you're going anywhere. Pop a goal, the drop goal.
Exactly.
So
hey Alan, I've got a try scorer for you.
Of course you do. Of course you do. I mean, let's actually before we move off, we castigated ourselves for our terrible bets last weekend. But Mark's pick for top try scorers currently evens at the top of the market, looking very strong. So my Bimpy from South Africa, that's looking very tidy for the money at the end. I mean, I'm on it. So it's probably going to fail. Apologies about that. But, we've got the value. We can eat the value, lads. Who do you fancy for this one, though, Sully?
Oh, going back to the well with my old friend Bungie.
Of course you are.
I have to.
Of course you
I have to go back to the well. I have to go back to the well with Bungie because, I mean, look, you look at this this South African rolling maul right now, and it's different gravy. It's different class. And even this Welsh pack, I think they'll struggle to kind of hold them. And it's going to be, like I said, if the weather is dictated, I think this is very much going to be a forwards game anyway. Value's kind of gone on Bongi. I think this cat is out of the bag. He's still back about 16 or 18.0 in Matchbook. Most of the sports book going are 10 or 11 to 1. But it's a £10 risk-free bet. Then
talk us through how that works, Sully, for the people that don't know.
Yeah, so if you haven't got a Matchbook account, you can sign up today. Your first bet, you can have it for £10 risk-free bet. So if you're watching us today and you want, one of those 33 to 1 drop goals that Mark was saying, or you want to back my good friend Bongi, open up Matchbook account today. This applies for new customers only. If your first bet loses this bet, we'll give your money back up to £10. So you can't get too carried away. Bet must be placed within 7 days of sign up. ACCA bets do not qualify, and you must be 18 or over. And the best place to find out about that, Mr. Bowden, is offer.matchbook.com. Offer.matchbook.com. So there you go. There's my plug.
Brilliant. There we go.
Yeah.
I felt like I was on commercial radio there for a minute.
Yeah, it was fantastic. Fantastic.
But I mean, seriously, I think 33s on a drop goal. Shitty conditions with the two players who love it, with the possibility of a free shot.
Yeah.
I mean, if I was getting my £10 risk-free bet.
Well, that's the beauty of the risk-free bet, is that you should be betting on something that's stupid price. There's no point coming in and having £10 risk-free bet on a 1.9 shot. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So it's kind of like having a free roll of the dice, but you might as well shoot for the stars rather than kind of playing an even money shot. But
talking my language now, Sully. You know I love a long shot. No, I love a long shot. Before we move on to the next game, can I just get a shout from you guys? Spread on number of box kicks in Wales, South Africa. It's got to be in the thousands, isn't it? Surely with those two. I mean, Faf de Klerk's going to be doing about 400 on his own. I think.
If it's a match bet between South Africa and Wales, I'll definitely make South Africa a good favourite. Everybody would have 1.2 shot on that.
All right, let's just move on to probably the biggest game of the weekend. I mean, people are already calling it the final before the final. England, New Zealand, or it's New Zealand, England, I think, isn't it, technically? Yeah. Fascinating game. Two teams who are possibly the most underrated and overrated in this World Cup so far. People don't really talk about New Zealand that much. They just kind of assume, this New Zealand, they'll crack on with it. They are what they are.
Yeah.
Failing to realise just the extraordinary depth of talent throughout that side and the incredible way they play. We were mentioning it earlier, the way that they've essentially reinvented their back play live throughout the Rugby Championship to emerge in the World Cup with this kind of split 10, to both sides of the field, playing different possibilities from the back play with Mo'unga and Barrett. Extraordinary team. And then you've got England, who smash a few people up, and everyone says they're going to win the World Cup. I mean, Mark, what's your views on this? Talk us through how you think England played on last weekend, and maybe where you're seeing this one headed for Saturday.
Yeah, I wasn't as hot on England as most people were, certainly in England, which is probably unsurprising, really. You look at that game in isolation against Australia, and yes, they were fair winners. I'm not going to deny that, but I think the scoreline did flatter them in a way, but the scoreline didn't flatter New Zealand against Ireland. Take out the 2 intercept tries, and I think the scoreline takes a much more accurate complexion. In my eyes, would have been around 26-16. England completely in control for sure, but it was only really in that last 15 minutes that they came to blow Australia away. Defensively, they were excellent. I think they had around 35% possession in the match. The discipline was really good too, something that I've criticised them about many, many times. But from an Australian perspective, you have to look at the almost clueless rugby they played at times, played into England's hands. We've seen it so often now with the Wallabies over the last 4 or 8 years, really just a lack of composure when it matters most, in possession, in danger areas. And I think a more measured team, like the All Blacks, wouldn't really have coughed up that kind of territorial possession as Australia did. And I think it's also probably not gone noticed for Owen Farrell was immaculate with the boot. He kicked 20 points. It's not often you get that in a international test match environment. So you have to, I know he's a great goal kicker, but you have to presume that regression will occur there, and suddenly that scoreline isn't quite as rosy as it probably was. They were accurate in everything they did defensively. As I said, they're absolutely outstanding, as they have been in this competition. But I said before Ireland's game against New Zealand that they had to be accurate and composed and clinical and focused and disciplined for 80 minutes, not just for 40 minutes or 60 minutes. And they weren't any of those for 80 minutes. If England are to improve on that Australian performance and come close to New Zealand, they absolutely have to be all of those. We know all about their physicality. Game management is okay; it's pretty decent. And Eddie Jones is, as much as I can't stand the guy, he's a decent tactician. So they are competitive, and they are going to be competitive in this match. But obviously, look at their team selection going back to Ford at 10, Manu back at 13, which I think is the right call. Yeah. Obviously got 2 scavengers in the back row of Underhill and Curry. But I think what's most interesting about this game is also what New Zealand have done, which is put Scott Barrett into the back row, a lock option, really, a second row option into the back row in place of Sam Cane. Obviously, Steve Hansen looked at that game against Twickenham last November, where New Zealand had a lot of joy at the line-out. Obviously wants to try and repeat that again, sacrificing a bit of speed at the breakdown, which I think is really interesting when you've got Underhill and Curry in opposition. So that's going to be really interesting to me. Clearly, New Zealand are respectful and well aware of England's threats, and I think they could be looking to play a bit more of a territorial game here than we might have come to expect normally with that team selection. But saying that, they've got absolute quality and across the park, and it's difficult to find a weakness, as much as I probably tried to last weekend and went a bit too OTT. But interesting game.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you mentioned the lineup there. Eddie Jones very much picked a side to attack Australia. It appears like he's picking a side much more that he just thinks is the best England side, and not worrying too much about what New Zealand do, because picking Laws instead of Cruz, it suggests that he's not too concerned about the line-out being attacked by New Zealand, which is interesting, bearing in mind what you've just said there. I mean, in case anyone thinks I was being serious, I was joking. England are an absolutely top-tier side here. New Zealand are just exceptional on their day at the moment. And that line kind of seems fair. It's holding firm at 7s, is it, at the minute, Sully?
Yeah, 7.5 right now. 1.99 either side's in that two-way handicap. That's what is that? 0.25% of margin. That's not bad at all. That's not bad.
Look at him. He's always getting the plug in.
Oh,
he's such a pro. I mean, what's your feelings on this one? Are you agreeing with Mark on this?
Yeah. This is one. If I think there's going to be a shot, this is probably where it's going to happen. Like even England at 3.74 right now, just under 11-4 in fractional terms. I've kind of gone back and forth a small bit on this. The Barrett point is really good, that Mark. It's really kind of pointed that they would pick him here. And I mean, it's a funny one. You're Steve Hansen, and you come off that huge quarter-final win against the Irish, and yet you make a really key change there. The back row is always a key area. And obviously, like Mark said, he's gone back to last November and looking at what they did well at Twickenham. And Ardi Savea has been so good in this World Cup that you could make the case that, he's just been so good that he'll be able to pick up any bit of kind of breakdown slack that Sam Cane will, what you'll be missing from Sam Cane there. And it's with this English team, I was kind of more strong on them coming into the World Cup, and then I kind of saw a few games, and I'm kind of thinking to myself, are they as good as I think they are? Because I just you always have to keep in consideration the opposition that they played and the opposition's performance. And like Mark said, Australia played some absolutely dumb rugby that actually just feed it into England, and just kind of gave England extra energy. I just don't see New Zealand doing that or being that dumb, so to speak. Like, I mean, I say we, but I was definitely skeptical of this whole Barrett at 15 and Mwanga at 10. But let's be honest about it, this has been an absolute dream come true for the All Blacks and their attacking game in particular. And the two wingers, I mean, there's lots of question marks prior to the tournament on them. But look, anyone who watched Crusaders and Super Rugby last year saw both those guys, Bridge and Reese, on those wings, and they're different class. Centres wise as well, I think Goodhue and Leonard Brown were really good the last. They were really, Leonard Brown especially was really good in the first game against South Africa. And if you look at contests that both teams have had to play, that South Africa game brought New Zealand on in a massive way the first game. Again, you have to remember they drew with them in Wellington a couple of weeks previous. They were struggling against the blitz defence, a defence that I think England will probably employ as well, because I don't think they know any way different here. And New Zealand right now just seem to have this ability. They kind of look at what teams are bringing and they're adjusting and they're saying, okay, you're bringing that, we're going to bring something totally different to counter that, and they can play a couple of different styles. And that's why, I mean, in a World Cup semi-final and you're getting this New Zealand team who, yes, probably not as good as the one 4 years ago, but they just seem to be timing it bang on to the button in comparison to, you know, the Irish who peaked last year. And yeah, they're just timing it right. I have an angle for my best bet later. The 7.5. If I had to pick a side right now, I'd take New Zealand minus. The total looks a bit low as well, 42. I think it could be one of those first half unders, second half overs kind of games. It's a tough one to call, but leaning with New Zealand right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, are we overreacting to the last set of games? You know, we were all very much, you know, Ireland can take this New Zealand side. They've got the capability of doing it. You know, they can be got at. They don't always perform at 100%, and that's definitely a thing with New Zealand. You know, their 100% game, as you said at the start of the show, Sully, is just unbeatable. No one's beaten them. It's just simple. If they turn 100%, you don't win.
It's about reaching that again. Can they reach what they reached last Saturday? And if they do, forget about it. They're winning. They're covering here. That being said, England won't be as sloppy as the Irish. Honestly, though, I thought this line would be small but bigger. Just sitting down to put my own numbers in my head, I thought it would have been closer to the 10. I thought it'd been the 8.5, 9 mark. So I think there is a small bit of value on New Zealand minus 7.5. These games have been close in recent years. But I just think New Zealand are timing this absolutely spot on, bang right, and that line-out is going to be key. I would much prefer to have George Cruz in there starting, because you know, you've got 3 line-out options now with New Zealand, whereas with 2, realistically, I know they've used Tom Curry in recent weeks, but he's still not a great threat there. But when you can put, you know, just think about a line of, you know, Barrett, Retallick, and Whitelock there. That is like, Jamie George is a heck of a hooker, but that's a tough.
Chuck Kieran Reid in there as well.
Yeah, that's a tough line to be throwing into. And like Mark said, if New Zealand are quite happy to play a bit more pragmatic, and Richie Mwanga can kind of pin them back and play the corners and hit, you know, kick for the line, even on the England throw, they're going to be quite happy to play this game out of the touch. So, yeah, fascinating game, interesting dynamics, slightly non New Zealand, but like I said, I have an angle for my best bet in a while.
Yeah, I mean, Mark, looking at England a bit further here, how do they get at New Zealand in this game, do you think? You know, it feels like a game, like Sully says, where there's going to be some points. It feels like a game where they're going to need to score some tries and need to get some points on the board to win this one. They're not going to be able to grind out a low-scoring game on penalties, I don't think. I mean, flash forward, that's exactly what happens, I'm sure, but it doesn't feel like that's going to be the type of game. How do England get at this New Zealand side? What's their potential here for attacking New Zealand and taking this game to them, do you think?
Well, I'm not sure. I think it was you. I'm not sure. Someone put up a tweet in the last week about how many England players were getting the New Zealand team. I didn't answer it, but I kind of thought about it this week. And...
If it was on Twitter, it was Alan. Like, so whatever it was.
I think it was me, actually. But sorry, yeah, carry on.
I think my answer is 3. Sinclair, possibly, Mako, and Manu. And the fact that 2 of those are props suggests that England could get a bit of joy around scrum time. If Ireland did have any sort of joy last week, it was potentially at the set piece. But I'm probably massaging the truth a little bit there, but I think that's possibly an area where they can exploit New Zealand a little bit. But yeah, if Manu's on his game and England getting ball in a bit of space, he's very, very dangerous. He's one of the best players in the world at doing that. Obviously, the game at Twickenham, 8 years ago or so now, lives long in the memory, and it shows what he's well capable of. Still, as much as this New Zealand centres were exceptional last weekend, I still don't feel they're at the same level as All Black centres we've seen in yesteryear. So, yeah, there are weaknesses there, but England have to be accurate in everything they do. I think in Farrell, they've got a guy who can orchestrate things, kick the goals, keep the scoreboard ticking over. And George Ford has to step up to the plate. And there's been issues with his, I wouldn't say his physicality, but he can often be overawed by very quick flash defences. I think if New Zealand do press up on him quick, there's potential there for things to go awry a little bit. But yeah, I mean, we tried to last week pick out the All Blacks' weaknesses. Didn't get us too far. So I think for this game, Sully sort of alluded to there, but recent battles between England and New Zealand have been close. Just the one under Eddie Jones's watch, that was the 1 point game at Twickenham, where I think England fans will look to it and try and be positive about their chances here. But I think it's always worth remembering when Northern Hemisphere teams do run the All Blacks close in sort of the November internationals, is New Zealand are coming off it's an end of season tour game for them. They're never going to be at their peak. So an All Blacks peak team is at the World Cup or in the summer tours for us. So I think it's very difficult to read too much into that. But the last 6 head-to-heads, 5 of them have been settled by 8 points or fewer. And I think we're going to see something similar here. New Zealand were double-digit favourites for all of those matches. Obviously, that's been trimmed a little bit here to 7-8 points. But they're not the team of 4 years ago for sure, but they're still a team with many, many talents. They've only lost 5 games in the last 36 tests, including the Lions tour. And I actually looked at their record against England and South Africa over the past 8-9 years, just because very similar teams. I know South Africa have been through the doldrums a little bit in that time, but they're both very physical outfits who play rugby in a very similar style. New Zealand have won 16 of those 19 games against those two teams. 15 of those matches were settled by 11 points or fewer. 12 of those 16 wins were settled by 11 points or fewer. So I think it's a good barometer for me, and it's a great lead into my market really. New Zealand to win by 1 to 12.
Here we go. Anyone who's playing the drinking game at home, take a shot now, please.
Twice. Same price, 2.7. I think that's a fair enough price for me. I do suspect that New Zealand will have enough. England are going to throw everything at them. They'll come close, but I just the extra X factor I think is with the New Zealand side. I think there's more weaknesses in England.
Yeah.
If you're looking for that market on Matchbook, by the way, folks, it's called winning margin. But by the time this afternoon changes, we're going to change to the Mark O'Haire winning margin.
Can we echo those 2 bets as well, Sully? The 1 to 12.
I don't think so at the moment. I don't know. I think it's just for the main markets. Yeah. A Mark O'Haire special ACA double. Yeah.
Get it quoted. Come on, mate. Get it up on there for us.
We've only had the ACAs 2 weeks, so give us time. We're tweaking. We're tweaking.
No, I mean, just looking again at that bet. I mean, again, we're talking back to how we were viewing it last weekend and the Ireland performance, and how we're viewing England against New Zealand today. Sully, do you feel like maybe this is a slightly better matchup for New Zealand, the way England play, not least because, as Mark kind of, I think, really accurately says, it's very similar to South Africa, who not only have they played a couple of times in the Championship, they played right at the start of the tournament.
Yeah.
Plus, New Zealand have really sort of been peaking through this tournament. It feels like just getting better as the tournament goes on. Do you feel like this is maybe a good matchup for them?
Yeah, I think so. I think they've adapted their game. Like if you'd played this fixture last year, you'd probably have given England more of a chance there, I think, and you could make the case for England. No, England haven't regressed. They've obviously, they've made improvements as well. But I just think New Zealand, they've more or less kind of gone back to the drawing board in 2019, and they've kind of sacrificed a few kind of performances even in the Rugby Championship, and prior to that in the November Test last year. The November Test last year, they were definitely found out, like obviously they beat England by a point, but that game was very much England's to win, and it was dire day weather-wise in Twickenham. England should have won the game. New Zealand battled it out. They lost to Ireland then as well. But, the last couple of weeks, I think that they've they've just found it. They've found what they've needed to beat these teams, to adapt their game, like I said. And right now, yeah, they're obviously very, odds-on favourites at this stage to win the tournament, and rightly so. So yeah,
just on the All Blacks. Sorry, Sully. I just almost a microcosm of what they all are about is that sort of 10-15 minute spell against the Springboks in that opener when they're under the cosh. They were clearly second best, and they just turn it around with a flick of a switch. Turnover ball. No team in international rugby is as clinical as that, or capable of doing that. And that's the concern really for England. They have to be at their very best, because if they don't, New Zealand will punish them. And they've done it to what we perceive as the second best team in the world at the moment. So they're absolutely well capable of doing it against England too.
Yeah, it's a sign of a quality team. I mean, that first, like you said, Mark, that first 15 minutes in the first game, like South Africa absolutely blitzed them. Like New Zealand looked lost even in their backline, but then they just stuck at it. They said, "Look, we've seen this before. We've seen this in Wellington a couple of weeks previous. We've seen it throughout the Rugby Championship in previous years. That we just need to stick to our game." They stuck to it, and like Mark said, literally just an average knock on, or just any bit of a drop in concentration. South Africa's defence was so good for the first 20 minutes. They switched off for literally half a second, and Leonard Brown made that break. And before we know it, Scott Barrett's underneath the post and these kind of things. So they're just so good in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the bigger odds bets, get our risk-free 10 quid back out again. Anything you fancy in this one, gents? Is there anything that leaps out at you?
Do you want to go here first?
Yeah, I'll have a crack. It's not a sexy price. It's around 5-1, but I think the England-New Zealand flip-flop in the half-time, full-time is potentially worth a bit of a shout here. England have made fast starts religiously, really, under Eddie Jones, particularly over the last 18 months or so. I think they went through a period of scoring at least one try in the opening 10 minutes of something like 7 of their 10 games coming into the tournament. Obviously, be very desperate to build a score here. Did so at Twickenham last November as well. And New Zealand, we've seen, bar last week, have been relatively slow starters against Springboks especially. And I think that's a curious case under Hansen, really. They do the majority of their damage after half-time. I don't think it would be a major surprise if England led this game by 2-3 points at half-time and New Zealand can roll back in the second half. So I always like the kind of flip-flops in the rugby in these kind of tight matches. So around 5-1 for that.
Yeah, I mean, if I was doing it in this game, as much as I kind of think he's overrated as a player, he's a bit of your classic head down, run straight player, Johnny May, but you don't often see him at 13 for a first try scorer market, do you? And in a game where I think I agree with Mark, I think if England have got any hope at all, they've got to come absolutely flying out of the traps and really take it to New Zealand early doors. You probably match up those first try score markets a bit more evenly in my mind in terms of the two teams than the weighting that seems to be given to New Zealand at the minute. I think 13's on Johnny May first try scorer wouldn't put you off that. Sully, any thoughts?
Just one I'm looking at here, maybe worth a flyer at 41.0, no try scorer.
No try scorer.
Yeah, I know.
So you're betting overs and no try scorer.
No, wait a second. There's logic. Hey, this is a risk-free bet. It's a risk-free bet.
I mean, the last time I laughed at you, this is a bongy. So I mean, I probably should get straight on this, everyone.
And I text you guys the morning of the Irish small game to give you Rory best first try scorer.
You did.
We didn't do that on the podcast, of course, so no one else can kind of back it. But that's great after timing from me.
41 on no try score though.
Just get the suspicion that there mightn't be a whole lot of tries. I think there'll be penalties. Obviously, Moanga and Farrell will kick their goals. Just maybe. Like again, it's a £10 risk-free bet, and could turn out to be a 15-6 kind of game. Remember, this is Cup rugby. I mean, teams if they're getting the option to kick for goals, they'll take it. They're not really worried about bonus points at this stage. So, 40-1.
There's your risk-free bets, everyone. What about the best bets for the weekend? This is what everyone really wants to hear. Mr. O'Haire, let's come to you first. Best bet for the weekend.
Yeah, we just talked about it. It's New Zealand to win by 1-12 at 2.7. I think England will come close. I think they'll put up a much stiffer test than Ireland did 7 days ago. Weather conditions probably suit New Zealand more if it does stay. If the rain does clear for Saturday, I think they'll just have enough to squeeze through. But it will be competitive. It will be attritional. But I just think they've got that extra class that will see them through by 2 scores.
Sully, best bet for the weekend?
Predicted on our anti-post preview, the Starters tournament, New Zealand South Africa final. I'm doubling up. I can get close to 1.9 currently at Matchbook at the time of recording. New Zealand South Africa to win. That's my bet of the weekend.
Nice. Right, my best bet of the weekend is don't listen to anything I say because I can't get it properly. I do really like Mark's half-time, full-time bet in the New Zealand-England game, though. And I've got a sneaking suspicion that Wales are going to get played off the park as well. So I won't be betting it myself, but I certainly wouldn't put you off betting on South Africa with the points.
For once, I think
your
Welsh pessimism for once is justified. That's what I suggest.
Unfortunately so. But anyway, enough about Wales. Two absolutely cracking games to look forward to this weekend and some really good-looking bets there, I think. And we're due a run, everybody. We're due a run. We got beaten down last weekend.
Hey, hold up a second. Our outright picks are looking pretty good. Sorry, they're looking pretty good. So yeah,
they're looking very good indeed. And we just. I mean, I'm very torn here. I want my man Mapimpi to score a couple of tries, but if he could do it maybe in the next game, that would be better than against Wales. I'd really appreciate it. Good luck with whatever you're betting on this weekend, and we'll see you back next week for the final. Take care.